and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who missed the Imagine Dragons pre-game extravaganza. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, and I'm still kind of emotionally recovering from it. I hope I'll be able to get there by the end of the show.
Oh, it set the tempo for this game. It didn't really. The fans barely noticed.
In that, like, the guitarist fell asleep mid-performance.
And they used their hands.
There we go.
So, it is our Champions League final review. It finished, spoiler alert, Liverpool 2, Spurs 0. A very early goal and a very late goal.
Yeah. I didn't think about it like that. You are correct, sir. Yes.
A lot of people also saying maybe not the greatest game they've ever seen. I think we have the reason why.
Yeah.
We'll reveal it later on. Because normally we do tactics first. But in this game, there was no time for tactics because there was a goal inside the first minute.
Exactly.
So I felt like we should follow what the game did
and
talk about that early goal. It was a penalty kick given away by Sissoko, handball. Salah took the penalty. But there's a lot more in the build-up, right?
Because it is still sort of, don't worry, we're not going to do like an extended analogy for how this is representative of the whole game, but it is representative of the game a little bit.
Okay.
Because it starts off, it's like a little bit of a scrum back and forth in the lead up to this penalty.
Yeah.
And basically what really is the kind of inciting moment is Virgil van Dijk stepping through and kind of bodying Harry Kane off the ball to win a header.
Yep.
And from there, it's quick passing by Liverpool. It's very good awareness from Jordan Henderson to spot that Sadio Mane is in an advantageous position, and then the handball comes. But it's that winner from Virgil van Dijk, I think, that sets the tone right there.
It sets the tone, and it leads to the penalty kick, right? And it's really important, especially because this is what Harry Kane was. He looked fit, right? He looked reasonably fit, but it's still something of a gamble after that long ankle injury layoff to start Harry Kane. And in hindsight, it feels really harsh to have the injury layoff and then send him up against Virgil van Dijk and Joel Matip, right? And then there's always a chance that, because Kane's really good at sort of winning headers even when he's not the bigger guy, or like doing something with his body to hold someone off. But this specific header, if you go back and rewatch it, it's inside the first 20, 30 seconds, right? Van Dijk essentially just knocks Kane out of the way, but legally.
Yes.
Like spins him a little bit, wins the ball with
right
his head.
on the line, I would say. I think the official... as far as I remember, I think I agreed with pretty much every call he made, and some of the play-ons I think that he allowed to happen. It encouraged a little bit of physical play, and I think once he established that, then he let stuff go. And I think this is one of the things that maybe it was right on that line, but I think Virgil van Dijk did just enough. I think I'm using that correctly in your people's language to not get the call.
So the other big thing about this is Kieran Trippier. I think is preparing for Harry Kane to bring this ball down and maybe lay it off and start some sort of counter-attack. So Kieran Trippier, the right back, starts sneaking up away from his back four, ready for the attack. Sadio Mane very cleverly then sneaks in behind Trippier, right? And that's why when this ball gets to Jordan Henderson, he's able to play that very clever clip ball over the top. And Sadio Mane is not in on goal, but he's sort of half in behind the Spurs defence to the point where Trippier and Sissoko have to kind of scramble back to try and close him down.
Exactly.
Right? That moment, I know it sounds like I'm being nerdy and detailed. I think that's really important.
Well, if you think that was nerdy and detailed, then buckle up. Because I would also point out that for the rest of the first half, really, one thing that you and I noticed is that Tottenham seemed pretty reticent to play the ball wide to those fullbacks. And it did not feel like those fullbacks were as getting aggressively forward as we've seen them do in the past, certainly as much as they did in the second half.
And maybe we'll talk about why later.
That's fine. But I would say, though, that it's interesting to me that one of the few times we did see Kieran Trippier clearly thinking, okay, it's on, I'm going to go forward. It's then not on, and also that's where the penalty kind of comes from. Not necessarily blaming Kieran Trippier, but just it does think maybe does make me think that maybe there's just that momentary shutdown of we're going to go forward. It's a counterattack. Oops, no, I'm out of position now.
Okay, let's get to the penalty kick.
So, should we get to sorry, go ahead.
The penalty kick being awarded.
There we go.
Yes. So it's Sadio Mane in the box with the ball. He kind of turns back, right? So then he's ready to cross with his right foot from the left. He's got Trippier sort of making sure he can't go to the end line. He's got Momo Sissoko. Musa Sissoko. I've done it again. Excuse me. He's got Sissoko. Is helping Trippier, which we've been really heavy on the praise for Sissoko in the past. He's really good at knowing when to do and how to do that double team, right? He's great at it. I think it's part of the reason he was kind of assigned to cover that right side. But weirdly, the only mistake he makes is he knows the cross is coming because he's smart. He knows what's coming. And I think you saw this, right? That's why his arm's in the air. It's because he's pointing sort of to the back post, almost telling Vertonghen and Alderweireld, "Hey, there's a cross coming." and then that's what gets hit with the ball.
Yeah, because to back up again, like after Van Dijk wins that header, there are 3 players who like are involved in this sequence because it's quick passing. And I think if you're Tottenham, you're sort of kind of backpedaling, trying to get a position. And I think Sissoko is trying to say like, "Hey, cross is coming. Just make sure everybody's aware." Because we went back and watched a couple times. Guy. Exactly, that's important. But also, there weren't that many like deadly runners into the box from Liverpool. It wasn't as though he was saying like, "Oh, there's somebody open. Make sure you get them." I think it's just sort of, "Hey, everybody, be aware." But because that arm's up, maybe Sissoko's not quite as aware. It does go off of his like pectoral, then it hits the underside of his arm. Then I think the other one that really doesn't help him is it kind of rolls all the way down to hit his hand. And I think,
or at least the wrist, but that area,
And though it was certainly accidental, I think because it was like also kind of a chipped ball from Sadio Mane, I think if you're the official, that looks like his hand is in an unnatural position.
I mean, definitely, he's not supposed to be up in the air like
and
that,
then
right?
he probably maybe has time to move it. It's not like a quick deflection that he had no chance. And I think also, as the commentators pointed out, that's the way they tend to call handball now. I think that was Stu Holden's point, is like that's the way they're calling handball, so it's going to be a handball.
It's like it definitely is a handball, definitely is a penalty kick, and yet it still feels really harsh. It's one of those weird things where it's technically accurate, but you just feel for Sissoko.
You do, and I think that's the other part of it, is that knowing that then he has an okay game, he does.
Yeah, it's a pretty good game.
He has his type of game. There's the moment when he bodies Andy Robertson off the ball for like 25 yards to shepherd it out for like a goal kick, and I remember that moment as thinking like maybe he turns this around, maybe he gets the goal, and then it's a completely different narrative. So when Sissoko subs out in the second half, I found myself thinking, oh, this poor man who's like been this really important player for Spurs in a way that I don't think they thought he would be at the beginning of the season. And yet it ends with him kind of conceding the handball penalty.
Okay, then the penalty. Mohamed Salah steps up, takes it, hits it. It looks definitive in the end, right? But when you rewatch it, it's kind of like centre-right, medium height. It's a very savable penalty, I think. And didn't we slow it down and we saw maybe did Lloris dive and Salah knew that he was going to Lloris's left, so therefore I can hit it down the middle? And that's not the case.
Not really. No, I think this is probably what you want in a Champions League final. In a big game like this, you want your penalty taker to just pick a spot and then it's head down, hit that ball as hard as you can. And that's what he does. Once you get sucked into mind games, we've seen it plenty of times. If you're trying to read the goalkeeper and the goalkeeper doesn't go, that can be problematic. If you sort of change your mind mid-run-up, that can be problematic. So I think just picking a spot and hitting it is what he did. Maybe banking on the idea that Lloris would like dive to one side or the other.
So you think maybe he's going just bang down the middle and he's thinking Lloris dives to one side or the other and just Salah's like slightly off target, which is why it's centre right as opposed to dead centre?
It's possible. It's possible. But I would be interested to see where, like, if you could have that graphic of where his penalties have gone in the past, because it did feel like Lloris made an effort to not leave prematurely. And we've heard from goalkeepers and goalkeeper coaches in the past that like there will be that research into if you stand your ground and don't move, they always go to your like bottom left. And maybe it was one of those sequences, but Salah just changes it up at the last second. Either way, I think it's kind of, even though it's not like the best positioned, perfectly placed penalty, it's still the type of penalty that I would want. If I were a Liverpool fan, I would have wanted Mohamed Salah to take it that way.
Of course,
because he scores as well.
1-0 inside the first 2 minutes. And then the game kind of settles down. I think this is when we can get into the tactics of the game maybe. And people have complained that this wasn't an entertaining game. I've seen a lot of Ajax Barcelona would have been better. Right? I think it's a lot about how Liverpool set up to stop Spurs playing from the back.
I would agree.
Is that fair?
Yeah, because we went back and watched like certain chunks at halftime and then certain chunks for the rewatch. And it is worth noting that like until about the 15th minute, the commentary team, the BT Sport commentary team, we should add.
Which I think was accidentally broadcast on Turner?
I'm not sure.
But
like
for the first half?
Maybe
we'll talk about this later.
Yes. But they were talking just about how Liverpool had maybe backed off a little bit, how Spurs had started to take control. Spurs looked the better side. They looked more lively. And then that very much switches. And it is maybe the kind of 10 minutes after the goal where I think Liverpool are in a position they never thought they would be in. And strangely, I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive because Liverpool have the lead. You would expect them to be kind of up for it and going for it. But if you're all about high press and high intensity and win the ball back and try to create a goal, and you've kind of done that inside the first 2 minutes, I think there can probably be a little bit of like, okay, we're going to back off now and be a little bit more conservative.
Right.
And I think they did that, and that's when you started to see Tottenham find their footing a little bit. As soon as Liverpool went back to the full-on gegenpress and putting Tottenham under pressure immediately, that's where it switched again to me.
Okay, so there's the number one thing is anytime Liverpool had possession and lost possession in Tottenham's half, like you said, gegenpress, which essentially means counter-press, right? It means when we lose the ball, we try as hard as possible to win it back early on. That's what Liverpool did really successfully, more times than I can count. I'm sure there's a statistician has counted it, but it's every clip we rewatch of Liverpool losing possession in the final third. They either won it back or made it really hard for Tottenham to do anything, right? So that's number one.
If you don't mind me jumping in there, and that's the other key thing that you added at the end there is like it's not just, yes, they win the ball back a lot, and that is obviously very useful for reestablishing possession in an advantageous position, but it's also the case that even when they didn't win the ball, it routinely ended up being a Tottenham player, like almost like desperation toe poking a ball out wide just to get rid, or a Tottenham player
kicking
it along in the theoretical direction of Harry Kane. And that is very clearly not what they wanted to be doing, because even if you do kind of back Harry Kane in some 50-50 challenges, you back him when he's positioned in the right way to then be able to challenge for that. If he's scrambling to get over for like just a cleared ball, that always favors your defenders a bit more, I think, because there's two of them there. So I think that extra level of pressure really prevented Tottenham from kind of slowing it down, getting the possession they needed.
And when Tottenham actually had time to build, like say they had a goal kick and like Lloris can play it short to Vertonghen and Alderweireld and they can start to build, this is where I think Liverpool, Klopp's game plan and setup was really on point and was absolutely set up to deal with what Tottenham were doing. So if you don't mind, I'd like to walk through the various sort of essentially marking options that Liverpool were exercising. Okay, so it's coming at the back. Spurs have a back four. They're fullbacks wide, right? Trippier wide right, Rose wide left. They have Harry Winks, who is starting and really is one of those very clever pivot type player, I think is fair to call him, right? You want the ball to go through him so he can start some sort of attack with some clever passing.
I can't say that he like stood out to me in terms of being exceptionally good at this, but I will say that I remember
in the past. Well, but there's a reason he didn't in this game.
But even what I was going to say is like I remember him coughing it up the least, and I more so remember him. Like I asked you at one point, was he in the England squad because he so capably played out of pressure the one or two times he did get the ball in that holding midfield role. So I thought that made sense to me, and I thought he did about as well as he could have.
Yeah, and the reason it was hard for Harry Winks is Liverpool obviously know that that's going to be the guy they go through. If you watch Roberto Firmino, you think he wasn't effective, and he kind of wasn't attacking-wise, right, in that he didn't do a lot. He was constantly blocking the pass into Harry Winks, not man-marking him, but essentially, what's the word, like fronting him? So if say, Alderweireld or Vertonghen has the ball, there's no pressure on those two centre-backs, so there's no press on them at all. But Firmino's marking or blocking the pass from them to Harry Winks. So that is that option is completely and absolutely cut out.
Yes, with like maybe a 1% chance of it. And this is where like I only make a difference here because I think it was the thing that you pointed out when we watched it is like not this analogy that I'm going to use, but like you know the old cartoon way of like catching the animal that's loose. It's like you've got the cardboard box with a stick and there's like the food underneath it, and when the animal goes in, you pull that. It felt like Liverpool had those set up around the field, and like Firmino was looking to be like, okay, is Sissoko or Winks, are they underneath the box? Okay, fine. Are you sure you don't want to pass to him? Like they kind of just left the door a little teeny tiny bit open.
So you
for
can
like,
make a bad pass.
You could try that pass and then I'll win it, or you could try that chip ball over the top and then our defenders will step and they'll win it, because I think that's the other element of what Firmino was doing, was blocking off the balls to the middle. So Tottenham maybe were baited into, okay, we'll try to chip it down the line for one of our fullbacks to run onto.
Speaking of the fullbacks, they're also kind of half-marked in the way that Firmino is blocking the pass to Winks. Salah is blocking the pass to Rose, because Salah's on the right, Rose is the left back. And on the other side, Sadio Mane is blocking the pass to Trippier, right? But again, not by man-marking them, but by just standing, like, almost, if you imagine the line of the pass as it would go from, say, Vertonghen's foot to Rose's foot, Salah would be always positioned halfway between that Vertonghen and Rose, so that pass could never be played along the floor, fizzed out wide to the fullback like that.
Yeah, and I think like we're not breaking any ground by saying this is what Liverpool were doing. Like they do this routinely.
I mean, no one on TV said it.
But I think the other thing that is like worth noting though is just that it's really difficult to do what these players were doing, because if I'm trying to prevent Daryl from passing to a player, I have to be aware of where Daryl is, but also the player behind me, because if I take a step in the wrong direction, now that pass is open, but that means Daryl has also bypassed that entire like kind of front line.
Yeah.
So to be able to kind of do both,
it's like a piece of the wall has fallen down in your castle.
Exactly.
Right?
and then, but if you don't let that happen, if you don't let that wall fall down, then not only is that player marked off, but Daryl, who still has the ball and is Tottenham center back, I guess, in this situation, sort of now feels a little bit of like, okay, the walls are now closing in on me because suddenly I can't pass that ball, and those players are stepping closer and closer and closer. I guess I got to do something, and there's no options through the middle, so inevitably they end up having to go long.
Yeah, and when you go long, you're looking for Harry Kane, who's normally a very reliable long ball target, but in this case, he is marked by either Virgil van Dijk or Joel Matip.
And he tried to make it Joel Matip than Virgil van Dijk, but didn't succeed too often.
And I deliberately included Matip in that because even though Van Dijk was magnificent, I would say flawless in this game. Or there's that one maybe incident in the 20th minute.
No, I'm all right. He's flawless. Whatever.
He's mostly flawless in this game. I think Matip was equally good and equally sort of handled Harry Kane.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it's Matip who draws a foul contesting a 50-50 ball because Harry Kane is maybe a little bit frustrated and trying to do whatever he can to even challenge for the ball.
Actually, can we talk about that for a second? Normally, Harry Kane is absolutely brilliant at winning those fouls. Like either by, I don't know, kind of tricking the referee or just being very good at making it look like he's the one being fouled, even though he's initiated contact. Again, go back to the World Cup and those penalties he won against those poor Colombians who didn't know what was coming for them.
Well,
Panamanians even worse.
A big difference in this one, I think, is that, but in those situations, it's also him in the box doing a lot of that, and it's him having gotten position. And if you think about it, like that foul on Matip is because Harry Kane is on Matip's back. It is very often the other way around. But I think it's those Liverpool, again, because Tottenham are forced into sort of direct balls that they don't necessarily want to be hitting. There's a big difference there. If they're aiming for Harry Kane, it means that he has gotten himself into a position to challenge and win that 50-50.
Yeah.
If they're just kind of like lifting it long, it allows those Liverpool center backs to step in, and now Harry Kane maybe who's like 5 yards away, now has to try to close that space, and because of that, he ends up fouling. And I think that's a huge difference.
Well, maybe one thing worth noting is the one time it kind of did work for Spurs is when they deliberately played it into Harry Kane. Do you remember that when he drops all the way deep and Van Dijk comes with him and he receives the ball? I think he lays it off.
Yeah, to Eriksen,
and it's an Eriksen wonderful through ball to Son. And Son's in a bunch of space because Van Dijk's been pulled all the way out by Harry Kane. And Liverpool are only saved by some very steady defending by Trent Alexander-Arnold. Does he just like stand up Son and eventually just poke it away from him?
He does.
But that was a real opportunity for Spurs because they'd used Kane correctly and he'd beaten Van Dijk. That was the only reason that I said I was reticent in the end to say that he was flawless because he did get kind of beat on that.
But I have a hard time.
Harsh.
Because I have a hard time saying he was beaten. Like I think he was doing what he was asked to do, was just track Harry Kane, and he tracked him 30 yards like back into the field.
I guess in my head I'm comparing it to the thing in the first minute where he just like rolls Kane and wins the header. But I guess you can't always do that.
No,
right?
But I mean it's also that like Harry Kane wins that because he again sprints 20 yards backwards. Like he's going back towards that ball. So like Virgil van Dijk, I think if anything he probably is only ever going to be able to foul Harry Kane there. So I have a hard time saying that necessarily negatively impacts his overall grade.
All right. Okay, so we've talked one goal and probably at least half the tactics we need to talk about, which means it's half time.
All right.
So half time, you have some ads, right?
Yeah.
So today's show is sponsored by Talisman Caps.
We're only going to do one Talisman Caps read. We're not going to show you the same product over and over and over again because for some reason only 4 companies can advertise in the Champions League.
Talisman Caps is sponsoring today's show.
That's right.
It's an independent millinery? Is that what you call the
what?
Milners? What are they called?
Are you talking about Hamid Milner?
No, hat makers.
They don't make James Milner.
Isn't a hat maker called a milliner?
Sure. Why not? I have no idea. Why are you asking me this as though I would know this? Do you think that's common knowledge?
I was kind of hoping you might know.
Sorry, my friend. Sorry.
Right. They make hats.
But sure, why not? Yes. They're James Milners.
They're based in Minnesota. I believe they're based in St. Paul. Lots of Minnesota United gear, lots of Minnesota-themed gear. But that's not all they do, right?
No.
They have hats that you would wear if you were a fan of the 2019 Champions League champions.
This is true. They've got plenty of different Liverpool hats. They've just got like the LFC hat, so you could just show your love for the club.
Because that's a phrase that people use a lot for Liverpool is LFC, right?
Yep.
And I assume it's not copyrighted, so you can kind of just use LFC wherever you want.
You're good.
But people know what it means.
And then I think they've got at least the Mohamed Salah hats. Yes. They've got the individual player hats. If you want to show your support for Tottenham, if you're a Spurs fan, they've got the
they need it right now.
The cockerel hat, I think, like just by itself, and then they've got a few others for like Tottenham as well. So if you want to support either one, if you want to show your support for Tottenham, if you want to be a bandwagon fan, and suddenly you've loved Liverpool for the past 5 years, but you need a way to physically show it.
Or the past week.
Yeah, or that. Or the past 2 hours.
Hat making is millinery.
There we go.
There we go. I was right.
We're not afraid to break new ground on the Total Soccer Show.
Probably should prep the ad better, though, by knowing it ahead of time.
Yeah.
All kinds of other hats available.
But then you wouldn't be Daryl Grove.
That's true, right? It's kind of fun to take a gamble sometimes, right?
Sure.
It's like me playing it long to Harry Kane when Van Dijk's on him.
Exactly.
You can also get the
They make hats that even fit Harry Kane's head, by the way, and that is no small achievement. That is no small achievement.
Talismancaps.com is the URL. If you want to get a 20% discount, use the code TOTALSOCCER20. That's the words Total Soccer, the numbers 20. You'll get 20% off any order of $35 or more. And luckily, all the hats cost $35.
That is very lucky.
So basically any hat, unless it's already on sale, in which case...
Buy two.
Or just put in the notes, hey, we heard about you on the Total Soccer Show.
And that should do it. There we go.
Just so they know where you came from.
Make sure you mention that you heard on the Total Soccer Show that they're James Milners, and that should do it. So thank you to Talisman Caps for sponsoring today's episode.
Top milliners.
Top milliners, indeed. I refuse to go milliner. I'm keeping it James Milner every time.
Speaking of James Milner, I want to talk about substitutions.
Sure.
Because I think one of the things Klopp got really right in this game was the timing of his substitutions and one tactical change he makes later in the game.
Yes.
Agree?
Yes, because it's worth noting here, we kept trying to figure out, like, okay, what does this adjustment mean? Why does he do this? Why does this happen? And I think we were looking for a lot of nuance where I'm not sure there was a lot of nuance because I think their system was working. And so I think the substitutions that were made, at the time I thought, like, wow, he just burned 2 subs in pretty quick succession. In the 62nd minute, he'd already used 2. And I thought, like, ooh, maybe something's wrong. He might regret that if Spurs are able to pull one back. And now going back and looking at it, it's basically, I think he recognized, okay, Firmino is pretty gassed, looks pretty tired.
And has come back from injury and has been doing that like Wink's blocking job.
And then, so that substitution makes sense.
Holding Tottenham's eye wide open, Clockwork Orange style, blocking the Winks.
Exactly. And then so on comes Divock Origi to, I guess, torture them, is what we're saying. That's good. And then, James Milner for Gigi Wijnaldum, because, not sure we've gotten to this one yet, but Gigi Wijnaldum has
what I wanted to talk
an
about.
Incredibly important role to play in all of this.
He does. Okay, so as we talked about with all the blocking and the marking earlier, the front three doing their job, the key, the one guy that's spare in terms of Spurs formation there is Sissoko, who's the co-defensive midfielder with Harry Winks. They had a weird setup, right, where Winks was kind of central and Sissoko was centre-right. They're really imbalanced formation. Sissoko was theoretically then available, right, when everybody else is marked off. But Giorgio Wijnaldum, despite being one of the 3 centre-mids, is tasked with then sort of stepping out and man-marking Sissoko. So essentially he's having to do a lot of running from central midfield up to the final third to block off Sissoko.
So that in and of itself is a lot of running, as you said, because he's setting up defensively, then kind of going out to make sure Sissoko doesn't have time on the ball.
Yeah.
But then, especially in the second half, once Spurs start to use their fullbacks a little bit more often.
They go for the trap, right?
Yes.
They see the open box and they're like, well, we're 1-0 down, we might as well go look in the box.
Yeah. But I think also at that point, they are able to find a little bit of space and a little bit of time. And then that's where Wijnaldum has to slide over and, in this case, like step to Trippier, for example.
Right.
Then if Trippier's now blocked off, he goes back to Sissoko. Now Wijnaldum has to go back to Sissoko. So I think that's where you start to see him looking a little bit more fatigued. And if I had to guess, like I have no insight if this is true or not, but my guess would be Klopp told him, like, run as hard as you can for 15 minutes or so. Then we'll get you out of there and get fresh legs in.
Yeah.
Because no one looked too mad to be being substituted out.
Yeah, he didn't look thrilled,
No.
but he also didn't look mad, right? Yeah.
And then again, he may have just been tired.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, oh, okay, it's over. I can rest now. Cool.
And Milner did well, right? When Milner came on, I don't remember any Milner mistakes. I remember him taking the corner kick for the second goal.
Do you remember any Milner mistakes, like, ever?
In his life?
Yeah.
No.
He seems pretty reliable, that James Milner. Yeah.
He sure is.
Yeah.
So good stuff from Klopp to essentially just keep the high energy that it takes to defend, to refresh the legs and keep it going, right?
Yeah, because even when Spurs start to make their own changes, and they do, Eric Dyer comes on for Sissoko. That's pretty like for like in my mind.
Yeah, that was an injury, right? And that's the last one they do. I think it's because of the injury.
Yes, but you've got Mora coming on for Winks as an example. You already said it was kind of an unbalanced formation. Christian Eriksen dropping into where Winks was somewhat makes it even stranger. Now you've got a lot of attacking options, which can leave you vulnerable, but can also also mean that you've got a bunch of people who can shoot the ball. And so I think even with that in mind, that Liverpool really make it difficult for Spurs to get chances. They still get shots, don't get me wrong, but you never really have those breakaway moments. Son has one more that Virgil van Dijk does a really good job to poke away.
It's an incredible, essentially a credible job just staying with him and then stepping across and poking it away without any chance of a free kick or a foul.
Yeah. But it's even more
penalty it would have been,
even more impressive watching it again because exactly. But if you watch it, you'll know that Virgil van Dijk always has it covered. It looks like he doesn't for a moment because Son is able to turn and I think get away from Matip a little bit. But Virgil van Dijk, the initial run he's making is almost okay, I know I'm going to get to you in a second, but first I'm going to make sure I've got my positioning right. Now I can step across and win it. And it looked a little last ditch to me when we watched it real time, going back and watching. He pretty much had it tracked the whole way.
I said this to you off air. That man literally deserves a medal.
Yes.
And now he has one.
And now he has one.
Champions League winners medal. He looked thrilled about it as well. He was, I think, tears of joy as well. I saw at the end of the game.
I would assume so.
Here's an interesting thing. Normally, throughout this Champions League campaign, and when we see Spurs play in the Premier League, Mauricio Pochettino makes some brilliant tactical switch, which essentially solves the problems, right? I think he's a great problem solver mid-game. Okay, I see the thing, I'm going to change it, and it works. I'm not sure he did that in this game.
No.
The closest we got was maybe adding Fernando Llorente late on, and then he has a bit more success in the air because he's Fernando Llorente. But that really changed the game against Ajax, right? In the second half, in the semi-final second leg. Didn't change the game here at all. And I think winning a couple headers against Matip and Van Dijk, it's not the same as dominating Ajax, right?
Certainly not. But I think it's also that when he came on versus Ajax, it was a completely different thing than what Ajax had been dealing with.
Yeah.
Because before that, it had been Lucas Moura and Son.
Yeah.
They're pacey, they're technical, they're very clever, but you can kind of handle that. When suddenly there's this new equation to deal with, which is Llorente, maybe you lose a little bit of focus on those darting runs.
Yeah.
But I bring that up just to say, but if you've been dealing with Harry Kane, basically trying to do that and failing, so now you've got, failing is harsh, but you get my point.
Yeah.
But now you've got Llorente kind of just doing that and Harry Kane roaming a little bit more. It's okay, well, we'll keep doing what we're doing. He is better at kind of going up for those 50-50s. But we can still back ourselves, and we've still got people around to kind of police up the area.
So if you're Van Dijk and Matip, you're just all right, the same, but taller, more Spanish.
Exactly.
Beard.
Yes.
Slower.
More handsome. Man,
all right.
Lest we forget, more handsome.
He's a handsome
We have
man,
to mention
right,
it.
yeah.
Yes, of
also,
course.
this isn't major, we haven't mentioned his name yet, but Fabinho, he's also very good as almost, not a third centre-back, but just a third tall guy who's in the central area. He won a few headers and a lot of tackles. There's a lot of Fabinho breakaways happened.
Yes.
So really good performance from Fabinho.
Certainly. And I'm glad you mentioned him, because I do want to make a point, if Spurs fans are still listening, which they may well not be at all.
We're talking a lot of Liverpool, aren't we? But it's them that won the game and kind of controlled the game.
It is. But it's also worth noting here, I've seen a few people point this out, I would agree wholeheartly, that this is a Spurs team that didn't spend any money. And you can fault the ownership for that and the front office for that. You can't fault the manager or the players for that. And as you bring up Fabinho, Fabinho, Van Dijk, Alisson, these are huge summer acquisitions, players that they were able to spend a lot of money on, not necessarily all at the same time, but you get my point.
Yeah.
That really matters, and that Tottenham were able to go this far in this competition.
Oh, it's a borderline miracle.
Starting Sissoko, who I think at the beginning of the season people weren't quite sure where he was going to fit. Harry Winks, again, I really enjoyed him and what he does, but you wouldn't have expected at the beginning of the year for Harry Winks starting for a Champions League final team. That makes total sense to me. So I think Spurs did an incredible job with the resources they had. I think this is where those resources ran out a little bit.
I think that's fair. We still have one more goal to talk about.
Let's do it.
We also have one more tactical change to talk about, which I think is really important. It was actually Klopp that made the big formation shift. And what he does is at some point, 78th, 79th minute, just before the last 10 minutes, Liverpool are it's getting a little loose, right? Spurs are getting a few crosses in. I think there's fullbacks are getting on the ball a bit more than before.
It comes 3 minutes or so after Son has just dribbled through and had Virgil van Dijk poke that ball away.
There we go. You see Jurgen Klopp, I think he originally talks to Mohamed Salah, holds up 4 fingers, and then the word spreads around the team. It's 4-4-2.
It is.
And what you see Liverpool go to is not that 4-3-3 where everybody has weird angles to cover, and it's actually hard work to do. I think this is the argument for it. It's just a basic 4-4-2 where you stay a bit compact and you all stay in your shape, and then you're a bit like synchronized swimming. You just step left and right and backwards and forwards. It's a bit more like an army marching rather than this weird dynamic thing that was before.
Theoretically, that's what it is. I will say that I have sympathy for someone like Sadio Mane, who then goes and plays left midfield. Because I feel like it would be the equivalent of you and me doing this show and then me saying to you, hey, I'm going to talk for a little while. When I pause for you to speak, don't speak this time. Just let it be silent, and then I'll keep talking. That you'd be nah, I got to fill that space. That's really weird. What are we doing
Can't
here?
do it.
And I feel like Sadio Mane in this case, a weird analogy, I know, but I'm good with it because we did keep seeing him sort of like, maybe I go now? Like, can I go forward, please? Okay, fine, I'll go back and play defense. And at one point you can hear Klopp screaming, Sadio, go back.
There's even one moment where he completely forgets. Origi goes and fills in, but too late.
Yeah.
And I think Spurs get kind of a chance from it. It ends up with a cross, a not great Alexander-Arnold clearance, and then you have Son get tackled by Milner just outside the box. That could have been a penalty kick.
Absolutely.
Or could have been a goal if Eriksen's free kick hadn't been saved by Alisson, who, I don't want to go deep into it, but worth mentioning, Alisson was flawless.
He was
absolutely superb.
And I would say like he had like that's a great save. He gets good and it's a great save because he has perfect positioning, so it doesn't need to be this like last ditch barely getting to it sort of save. But you can be flawless and not be necessarily remarkable. As in he never made a mistake. He didn't spill the ball. Like I think one time he kind of punched it loose and Tottenham were able to get another chance, but that was after he made a kind of getting down low and getting it out with a hand. That's really hard to do. So like I wouldn't say that he has like a highlight reel of amazing saves.
There's no one-on-ones because of Liverpool's great defensive system. There is no Spurs one-on-one with Alisson.
And so the
closest was Van Dijk intervened and it didn't happen. Yeah.
So then he does exactly what he needs to do to make sure that Tottenham don't get a goal, and instead, as you've already said, Liverpool go ahead and get one more goal.
They do, and worth noting, the second goal starts with Alisson.
It does.
It is a wonderful, big Tim Howard versus Algeria style throw out to the left wing for Andy Robertson. And it even like goes beyond Robertson and Robertson has to chase it down, but it still plays, it's almost like a leading pass. It plays him into space.
I think it's so well thrown that Robertson actually lets it go in front of him. Like he lets it roll. I think he recognizes I have space and time.
Yeah.
But then I think doesn't quite recognize the force of the ball because I think he just barely keeps it in bounds. But keeps it in bounds and then he plays in. Is this the one where it's the long ball in that maybe Danny Rose didn't need to put out?
Yeah, it's like a whipped but long cross to the far post for Mohamed Salah is what he's aiming for. But Danny Rose does like and it's overhit a little bit, right? Danny Rose just like a diving shoulder, nudge it behind for a corner kick, and then apologises, which is how we know that maybe he knows that didn't need to happen.
Yeah, but the other reason why that stood out to us is because we couldn't remember the game exactly. I think it was the Ajax game, the second leg when Spurs eventually come back, but Danny Rose does that again. He puts it out of bounds when he doesn't need to, when there's not much pressure, and I believe I'm correct in saying that it leads to an Ajax goal. Yeah. Certainly leads to a goal, if not against Ajax.
It's a bit rough though. It's like the Sissoko thing where I think Rose is actually a really good defender when balls are whipped to the back post. There's lots of instances in this game where he beats Salah to a Robertson cross because Robertson whipped in some really nice crosses. So it's almost like he's doing the thing he was doing really well, but maybe this time he didn't need to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I am happy because it further cements your argument that Jurgen Klopp made some smart substitutions because James Milner goes over and takes this corner. That's a substitution. Divock Origi, a substitute, scores the goal.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
And as is, I think, like tradition with Liverpool, don't worry because Matip and Virgil van Dijk are involved.
They are. Okay, I want to talk about this because I'm sure people have heard me say this on the show before. I know Grey Hair Gaming has because he mentioned this on Twitter. I'm not a big fan of sending both centre-backs forward for corner kicks because I think it leaves you exposed. And theoretically, in this case, it's the 87th minute? You're 1-0 up against Tottenham in the Champions League final. If I was the coach, I'd be saying maybe, all right, let's keep one of our centre-backs back. We don't need to send them both forward. I actually think, even though I still believe, that's still something I believe, I think it's okay for Liverpool to do it because Van Dijk and Matip are so good in the air. And actually I don't know what the percentage is, but their success rate in terms of scoring from corners or at least winning headers is higher than for most centre-backs. So maybe it's okay. And I think you can see that on this goal where Van Dijk actually whiffs at the cross when it comes to him. He whiffs, but then he challenges again with a header for the second ball. Matip gets to the loose ball, and I think not with his head, but just a simple, actually very smart, simple, calm, square pass to Divock Origi. To set him up ready to shoot.
Who buries it back corner with his left foot.
Right?
It's a great goal.
Isn't it just inside the far post?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And then, as other people have pointed out as well, especially on Twitter, that's a player that they signed for, I think, £10 million, maybe €10 million in like 2014. So while Jurgen Klopp utilized like his very expensive shiny players to great effect, he also utilized the players that were less expensive.
There we go.
And I would say that you're right that it is dangerous to put those center backs in that type of position. I think number one is you kind of back Virgil van Dijk to be Virgil van Dijk, but number two, it's worth noting that like this is the exact same like side of the field, the exact same spot where the corner was taken that Trent Alexander-Arnold was taking these corners in the game against Ajax. He's not taking this one. It's Thomas Milner, and I think that is an adjustment, that you have Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson all the way back. So if there is a counter, you've got...
Oh, those guys are quick. They're both quick.
Exactly. Yeah. The guy who has already proven that he can get across and like cut out counterattack before it even really happens.
Yeah.
Because that's who's going to be breaking. You don't need Virgil van Dijk to body Harry Kane off the ball. You need your pacey defenders to make sure that the kind of pacey attack is nullified.
That makes sense. So 2-0 Liverpool. I don't have anything else to say about this game, so maybe just to close, I just want to say this Liverpool team, the season they had, I think I'm really happy that it ends with a trophy.
Yeah.
Because
you said that before the game started.
Yeah, because maybe they're not able to have a 97-point Premier League season again, and maybe they don't win the Premier League, and maybe they sort of weirdly... I wouldn't say they deserve to win the Premier League because Man City were eventually the better team this past season, but it was such a great performance of a season that it deserves some recognition in the history books, and the Champions League's not some bad recognition.
Yeah, it's fine. No, I'm kidding. It was a deserved win for Liverpool. I'm happy for Liverpool. Yeah. I'm also happy that we get rid of some of the narrative. Like Jordan Henderson, I think, has had a lot of criticism in the past that he captained this team and wins the Champions League. That makes me happy. That Jurgen Klopp finally wins some major silverware. We can kind of get away from some... Because even I, like when we went like midway through, I think you weren't on that show, but I was talking about how like I had some concerns for Liverpool in their very first knockout round like fixtures, and I made the point that like if things don't go well and they get knocked out there is some question of like what's going on with Jurgen Klopp. Like they maybe not going to win. I think at that point they were like maybe not going to win the league, and it was sort of like if they don't win the league, if they're knocked out of the Champions League, like do they start to wonder? They're definitely not going to wonder now because they have won the Champions League.
And isn't there always that? I mean, I deliberately don't get involved. I think we don't discuss it on the show. Those arguments of like, oh, Klopp always bottles it in the final. So didn't he lose the Champions League final with Dortmund, and he lost Champions League final with Liverpool, lost the Europa League final with Liverpool. So. But there's no such thing really as a high-end manager being like a final bottler. That's such a silly thing.
To steal a phrase from the Guardian Football Weekly, there's no such thing as a witch's curse.
So to have Jurgen Klopp has now won the Champions League final, now you can't have that silly argument. Not that we ever did, but I don't even have to see it on Twitter.
No, I'm just relieved that when we came out of the ad break for this show that we were still here and not some other commentary team. So that's really where I'm most happy, but I'm also happy for Liverpool and Liverpool fans and our friends. We have many friends who support Liverpool, so congratulations to them as well.
We also have some Spurs supporting
friends.
Except
for Trey, if he's listening.
We also have some Spurs supporting friends. I think you already said it, but I want to reiterate it. Given that they made no signings and didn't really reinforce and the squad was a little thin, this is an incredible season.
Absolutely.
Finish top 4, get to the Champions League final. It is absolutely incredible. And I would also maybe back up our complaints at the start of the season, whereas maybe if Spurs would spend and reinforce and, Van Dijk, Alisson type reinforcements, that's what pushes Spurs to next level, genuine Premier League challenges, that kind of thing. So I really think this is the best that's going to happen with the investment that was made in the playing staff this year.
Yes.
I also think it's not a coincidence that this was the year that the stadium was opened.
Also that.
Right?
Yeah.
I know it's like, doesn't Pochettino always say, I just don't think we need reinforcements. But I think that's what Wenger said around the time that Arsenal opened their big new stadium and didn't spend much money on transfers at around the same time.
Yes.
Just saying there's a coincidence there.
Yes. I do think Mauricio Pochettino has all the leverage in the world now because, like, not necessarily that this would have happened, but it is the case that if they won the Champions League, then maybe Daniel Levy's like, yeah, but you already won the Champions League. You don't need money. You're fine.
Maybe sell some players.
Yeah, in fact, we're taking away 2 of your players. And we're going to keep that money for another stadium in the future. So, yes, I do think Pochettino now can maybe take that as, like, look, if you want us to get better and if you want me to definitely stay here long term, you got to spend some money.
Stadium's built. And spend some cash.
And to that end, I think we'll know fairly quickly. Like if Tottenham go out if July 1st they're signing somebody, I feel like that is a very much statement of intent.
Yeah. Okay, we should definitely wrap up because we've got Richmond Kickers versus North Texas SC game to get to, and it kicks off in 25 minutes.
It does.
So I will say, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to watch the game and talk with me today.
Right back at you, buddy. Congratulations to Liverpool fans.
Yeah, listeners, thank you for listening. We'll be back on Monday with maybe Gold Cup roster stuff if the US announces it, but definitely Women's World Cup previews. We will continue with Group D.